The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of the Los Angeles County Courthouse, casting long shadows across the worn wooden benches. It was early 1979, and Arnold Schwarzenegger, then just 32 years old, sat on one of those benches, his massive frame looking almost comical in the neatly pressed business suit he'd purchased specifically for this day. The young Austrian immigrant had already made a name for himself in the bodybuilding world, having won Mr. Olympia 6 times. But today, he wasn't facing judges who measured biceps and evaluated poses. Instead, he was about to face Judge William Henderson, a stern 68-year-old veteran of the California legal system, known for his sharp tongue and even sharper wit. The case seemed simple enough on paper. 6 months earlier, Arnold had purchased a small gym in downtown Los Angeles, seeing it as the perfect opportunity to expand his growing business empire. The previous owner, Tom Martinez, had assured him everything was up to code. However, within weeks of the purchase, Arnold discovered serious structural issues that threatened to cost him thousands in repairs. As Arnold waited for his case to be called, he couldn't help but notice the sideways glances and whispers from the court staff. He was used to attention, but this was different. These weren't the admiring looks he got at Gold's Gym or the excited whispers of fans. These were looks of skepticism, perhaps even ridicule. Case number 1979-284, Martinez versus Schwarzenegger, the court clerk announced, her voice echoing through the high-ceilinged room. Arnold rose, his movement deliberate and confident despite the butterflies in his stomach. As he approached the defendant's table, he could feel Judge Henderson's eyes on him. The judge, a small man with wire-rimmed glasses and thinning gray hair, peered down from his bench with an expression that mixed boredom with barely concealed amusement. "So, Mr. Schwarzen," Judge Henderson deliberately stumbled over the name, causing several spectators to snicker. "Why don't you tell us why you're wasting the court's time today?" Arnold stood straight, his 6'2" frame casting a shadow across the courtroom floor. "Your Honor, I am here because Mr. Martinez sold me a property under false pretenses," he began, his accent thick, but his words carefully chosen. The judge leaned back in his chair, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "And you, what, didn't bother to inspect this property before purchasing it? Too busy posing in front of mirrors, perhaps?" More laughter rippled through the courtroom. Even Martinez's lawyer, a sharp-dressed man named Richard Cohen, couldn't suppress a smile, but Arnold remained composed, though his jaw tightened slightly at the judge's words. "Actually, Your Honor," Arnold responded, reaching for his briefcase, "I did inspect the property. However, Mr. Martinez deliberately concealed certain structural issues that wouldn't be visible during a standard inspection." The judge waved his hand dismissively. "Mr. Cohen, please present your client's case. Let's see if we can wrap this up before lunch. I have a feeling this won't take long." As Cohen stood to speak, Arnold quietly began organizing the documents he'd spent weeks preparing. Few people in the courtroom knew that he'd been studying property law every night for the past month, preparing for this moment. While others saw him as just another muscle-bound immigrant trying to play businessman, Arnold had a secret weapon, his relentless determination to prove them wrong. What the judge didn't know was that inside Arnold's briefcase lay a carefully organized collection of evidence: photographs, inspection reports, witness statements, and even relevant case law he'd researched himself. The same discipline that had made him Mr. Olympia was now focused on winning this legal battle. The courthouse clock ticked steadily as Cohen began his opening statement, painting Arnold as an inexperienced businessman who was trying to blame others for his own poor judgment. With each word, Judge Henderson nodded approvingly, occasionally glancing at Arnold with what looked like pity mixed with contempt. Little did anyone in that courtroom know that they were about to witness something extraordinary. The man they saw as just another bodybuilder was about to show them exactly why it was unwise to judge a book by its cover, or in this case, a businessman by his biceps. As Arnold sat there, listening to Cohen's presentation, a slight smile crossed his face. He knew something they didn't. He was about to shock everyone in that courtroom, especially the smug judge who thought this case would be over by lunch. Cohen, Martinez's lawyer, stood confidently before the court, his polished appearance matching his well-rehearsed presentation. "Your Honor," he began, adjusting his expensive tie, "my client sold his property in good faith to Mr. Schwarzenegger. If there were any issues with the building, they developed after the sale was completed." Judge Henderson nodded approvingly as Cohen pulled out a stack of glossy photographs. These pictures, Your Honor, were taken just 2 weeks before the sale. As you can see, the property was in excellent condition. The photos showed a clean, well-maintained gym with freshly painted walls and new-looking equipment. Arnold watched carefully as Cohen displayed the photographs. His expression remained neutral, but inside he felt a surge of anticipation. Those photos would soon prove to be one of Cohen's biggest mistakes. Furthermore, Cohen continued, his voice carrying a note of condescension, "Mr. Schwarzenegger, being new to this country and perhaps unfamiliar with our business practices, failed to conduct proper due diligence before the purchase." The judge peered over his glasses at Arnold. "Is that true, Mr. Schwarzen? Whatever? Did you not understand the concept of property inspection?" Before Arnold could respond, Cohen interjected, "Your Honor, my client even has witnesses who can testify to the building's excellent condition at the time of sale. We have Mr. James Wilson, a regular gym member, and Mrs. Patricia Rodriguez, who owns the neighboring shop." The first witness, James Wilson, took the stand. He was a middle-aged man with graying temples who claimed to have visited the gym 3 times a week for the past 5 years. "That gym was perfect," Wilson testified. "Martinez kept everything in top shape. I never saw any problems with the building." As Wilson spoke, Arnold quietly made notes on a legal pad. The judge watched this with mild amusement, probably assuming the bodybuilder was just pretending to understand the proceedings. The second witness, Patricia Rodriguez, proved even more supportive of Martinez's case. "I've owned my shop next door for 20 years, she stated firmly. "That building has always been well maintained. Mr. Martinez was an excellent property owner." Cohen paced the courtroom floor with growing confidence. "Your Honor, it's clear that my client maintained this property impeccably. Mr. Schwarzenegger's claims are nothing more than an attempt to extract money from an honest businessman." The judge seemed to be thoroughly convinced. He looked at Arnold with what appeared to be a mixture of pity and impatience. "Mr. Schwarzenegger, do you have anything to say in your defense, or shall we wrap this up?" Arnold stood slowly, his imposing physical presence drawing all eyes in the courtroom. "Yes, Your Honor, I do have something to say, but first, I would like to ask Mrs. Rodriguez a few questions, if I may." The judge sighed heavily. "Very well, but make it quick. We're all getting hungry here." Arnold approached the witness stand, carrying a single folder. His accent was thick, but his words were carefully chosen. "Mrs. Rodriguez, you said you've owned your shop for 20 years, correct?" "Yes, that's right," she replied confidently. "And you testified that you've never seen any problems with the building?" "That's correct." Arnold opened his folder and pulled out a document. "Then could you explain this complaint you filed with the city building department 3 years ago? The one where you reported, and I quote, severe water damage and possible structural issues in the wall between your shop and Mr. Martinez's gym." The courtroom fell silent. Mrs. Rodriguez's face paled noticeably, while Cohen quickly stood up, looking alarmed. Even Judge Henderson's expression shifted from dismissive to intrigued. I don't remember filing any such complaint," Mrs. Rodriguez stammered. Arnold turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I have the original complaint right here, complete with Mrs. Rodriguez's signature and the building inspector's report that followed. Would you like to see it?" Judge Henderson leaned forward, suddenly much more interested in the proceedings. "Yes, Mr. Schwarzenegger, I would very much like to see that document." As Arnold handed the paper to the bailiff, he could feel the atmosphere in the courtroom shifting. The snickers and dismissive glances were replaced by surprised murmurs and intense attention. The judge who had been mocking him just moments ago was now studying the document with great interest, while Cohen hurriedly whispered with his client. The real battle was about to begin, and Arnold was just getting started. The atmosphere in the courtroom had shifted dramatically. Judge Henderson adjusted his glasses and carefully read through the complaint Arnold had just presented. The silence was broken only by the soft whispering between Martinez and his lawyer, Cohen, who looked increasingly uncomfortable. "Mr. Schwarzenegger," Judge Henderson said, his tone noticeably more respectful than before, "you may proceed with your case." Arnold nodded and pulled out another document from his briefcase. "Your Honor, I would like to present what I discovered within weeks of purchasing the property." He handed several photographs to the bailiff. These weren't the glossy, professional shots Cohen had shown earlier. Instead, they were detailed close-ups of walls, floors, and supporting beams. These photos were taken by a licensed building inspector, Mr. Robert Turner, exactly 1 week after I took possession of the property. Arnold explained, his accent still thick, but his legal terminology precise. If you look at the date stamps on the bottom right corner, you'll see they were taken on March 15, 1979. The judge examined the photographs carefully. They showed severe water damage, cracking foundation walls, and what appeared to be mold growth behind recently installed paneling. But that's impossible. Martinez suddenly burst out, his face reddening. Those damages weren't there when I sold the property. Judge Henderson shot Martinez a stern look. Mr. Martinez, you will speak only when addressed by the court. Arnold continued, maintaining his composure. Your Honor, I would like to direct your attention to this particular photograph. He pointed to an image showing a section of wall where the paneling had been removed. Notice the date written in marker on the back of this panel. January 12, 1979, exactly 1 month before I purchased the property. The judge leaned forward, squinting at the detail. And what are we looking at here, Mr. Schwarzenegger? This shows that new paneling was installed to cover up extensive water damage and mold growth, Arnold explained. The date proves these issues existed before the sale, and Mr. Martinez was aware of them. Cohen jumped to his feet. Objection, Your Honor. This is pure speculation. Overruled. Judge Henderson replied, his earlier mockery completely gone. Continue, Mr. Schwarzenegger. Arnold pulled out another document. I also have here the testimony of Mike Peterson, the contractor who installed this paneling. He has signed an affidavit stating that Mr. Martinez specifically instructed him to cover up the damage rather than repair it properly. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Martinez's face had gone from red to pale, while Cohen frantically flipped through his papers, searching for a way to counter this unexpected evidence. Furthermore, Arnold continued, his confidence growing with each word, I have obtained copies of 3 different estimates Mr. Martinez received for properly repairing these issues. All dated within 6 months before the sale, all rejected in favor of the cosmetic cover-up. Judge Henderson removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. When he looked at Arnold again, there was something new in his expression. Respect. Mr. Schwarzenegger, I must admit I'm impressed by your thoroughness. Where did you learn to prepare a legal case like this? Arnold allowed himself a small smile. Your Honor, in my country, I completed business school before coming to America. And since discovering these issues, I have spent every evening studying California property law at the public library. I believe in being prepared. The judge nodded thoughtfully. Indeed you do. Mr. Cohen, do you have any response to this evidence? Cohen stood, adjusting his tie nervously. Your Honor, we request a brief recess to review these new documents. Granted, Judge Henderson replied. We'll take 30 minutes. As he rose from the bench, he paused and looked directly at Arnold. Mr. Schwarzenegger, I owe you an apology for my earlier behavior. It seems I made some unfair assumptions. As the courtroom began to clear for the recess, Arnold remained at his table, organizing his remaining evidence. He could hear the whispers of amazement from the spectators, see the worried expressions on Martinez and Cohen's faces, and feel the shifted energy in the room. The young immigrant who had been mocked just hours earlier had transformed into a formidable legal opponent. And he wasn't finished yet. There was still more evidence to present, more surprises to unveil. After the 30-minute recess, the courtroom reconvened with a markedly different atmosphere. The spectators who had earlier smirked at Arnold's accent now leaned forward in their seats, eager to see what else the bodybuilder-turned-legal expert would reveal. Judge Henderson called the court back to order, his demeanor now serious and attentive. Mr. Schwarzenegger, please continue with your presentation. Arnold stood, pulling out a thick folder from his briefcase. Your Honor, I would now like to address the financial aspects of this deception. He produced a series of documents, each carefully labeled and organized. These are the repair estimates I received after discovering the true condition of the property. The bailiff distributed copies to the judge and opposing counsel. Arnold continued, his voice steady and clear. The total cost of necessary repairs amounts to $47,500. This includes structural reinforcement, mold remediation, and proper waterproofing, all issues that Mr. Martinez deliberately concealed. Cohen, still trying to regain his footing after the earlier revelations, interjected. Your Honor, these estimates seem grossly inflated. My client sold the property for $85,000. These alleged repairs would amount to more than half the purchase price. Arnold was prepared for this argument. If I may, Your Honor. He pulled out another document. This is an independent appraisal from the city's building department, conducted last week. Their estimate for necessary repairs is actually higher, at $52,000. Judge Henderson studied the new document carefully. Mr. Cohen, do you have any evidence to counter these figures? Cohen shuffled through his papers nervously. Well, Your Honor, we have our own estimates that are significantly lower. May I see them? The judge asked. We haven't had them prepared yet, Your Honor, Cohen admitted reluctantly. Arnold seized this moment to present his most damaging evidence yet. Your Honor, I have here a copy of an insurance claim Mr. Martinez filed 2 years ago for water damage in the exact same areas. He handed the document to the bailiff. The insurance company's assessment at that time valued the repairs at $43,000. Mr. Martinez collected this insurance money but never performed the repairs. The courtroom burst into shocked murmurs. Martinez slumped in his chair, his face ashen. Cohen appeared to be at a loss for words. Mr. Martinez, Judge Henderson's voice cut through the noise. Is this true? Did you collect insurance money for repairs you never made? Martinez leaned over to whisper to his lawyer, but Arnold wasn't finished. Furthermore, Your Honor, I have obtained statements from 3 former gym members who complained about water leakage and mold smell during their workouts. Mr. Martinez dismissed their concerns and offered them free membership extensions to keep quiet. Judge Henderson's expression grew increasingly stern as he reviewed each new piece of evidence. The same judge who had mocked Arnold's accent hours earlier was now hanging on his every word. Your Honor, Arnold continued, I would like to point out that according to California Civil Code Section 1710, deliberately concealing known property defects constitutes fraud. Mr. Martinez not only knew about these issues but took active steps to hide them. The judge raised his eyebrows, clearly impressed by Arnold's legal knowledge. And where did you learn about this specific statute, Mr. Schwarzenegger? From studying at the law library every evening for the past month, Your Honor, Arnold replied. I believed it was important to understand my rights under California law. Martinez suddenly stood up, his face red with anger and embarrassment. Okay, fine, I covered up the damage, but I needed to sell the property quickly. I couldn't afford the repairs, and I thought. His voice trailed off as he realized he had just confessed in open court. Judge Henderson banged his gavel. Mr. Martinez, sit down. You have not been asked to speak. He turned to Arnold with newfound respect. Mr. Schwarzenegger, do you have any additional evidence to present? Arnold nodded, reaching for another folder. Yes, Your Honor. I have documentation showing a pattern of similar behavior by Mr. Martinez with other properties he has owned. The courtroom was now completely silent, every person present realizing they were witnessing not just a legal proceeding, but a masterclass in preparation and determination. The muscleman they had underestimated was systematically dismantling his opponent's case with the precision of a seasoned attorney. The tension in the courtroom was palpable as Arnold opened his next folder. Your Honor, what I'm about to present shows that this wasn't an isolated incident. He produced a series of newspaper clippings and property records. Mr. Martinez has owned 7 different properties in Los Angeles County over the past decade. Judge Henderson leaned forward, his interest clearly piqued. And what relevance does this have to the current case, Mr. Schwarzenegger? 5 of these properties were sold under similar circumstances, Arnold explained, his voice steady and confident. In each case, the buyers discovered hidden structural damage shortly after purchase. However, none of them had the resources to pursue legal action. Cohen jumped to his feet. Objection, Your Honor. These alleged prior incidents are not relevant to the current case. On the contrary, Arnold countered, pulling out another document. According to California Evidence Code Section 1101, evidence of prior similar acts is admissible to prove intent, preparation, and pattern of behavior. The judge's eyebrows shot up, clearly impressed by Arnold's legal knowledge. Objection overruled. Continue, Mr. Schwarzenegger. Arnold proceeded to lay out a detailed timeline. In 1975, Mr. Martinez sold a property to the Johnson family. 3 months later, the teenage son was hospitalized with severe respiratory issues caused by hidden mold. He placed medical records on the evidence table. The family couldn't afford to fight in court and had to declare bankruptcy. Martinez shifted uncomfortably in his seat while his lawyer frantically scribbled notes. In 1976, Arnold continued. He sold a commercial property to Mrs. John for a restaurant. The concealed water damage led to a ceiling collapse during business hours. Fortunately, no one was injured, but she too lacked the means to seek legal remedy. Judge Henderson studied the documentation carefully. And you verified all of these incidents? Yes, Your Honor. Arnold produced notarized statements from each previous buyer. I tracked down each victim and obtained their sworn testimonies. Many were reluctant to come forward until they learned they weren't alone. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of papers being shuffled. Even the spectators who had come to watch what they thought would be a quick and amusing case were now completely engrossed in the proceedings. But there's more, Arnold said, pulling out building inspection records. In each case, Mr. Martinez followed the same pattern: cosmetic repairs to hide structural damage, rushed sales, and careful timing to avoid routine inspections. Martinez suddenly stood up, his face red with anger. This is ridiculous. You can't prove any of this. Mr. Martinez, Judge Henderson warned sternly, one more outburst and I'll hold you in contempt. Arnold remained calm, continuing his presentation. I have here a sworn statement from Mr. Thomas Reynolds, a contractor who worked for Mr. Martinez on 3 of these properties. He details specific instructions he received to cover up structural issues rather than repair them properly. Cohen, looking increasingly desperate, tried one last objection. Your Honor, even if these other incidents occurred, which we don't concede, they happened years ago. The statute of limitations. Actually, Arnold interrupted, pulling out yet another document. According to California Civil Code Section 338, the statute of limitations for fraud is 3 years from the discovery of the deception, not from when it occurred. All of these cases fall within that time frame. Judge Henderson removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes, clearly processing the weight of evidence before him. When he looked at Arnold again, there was unmistakable respect in his gaze. Mr. Schwarzenegger, the judge said, in all my years on the bench, I've rarely seen such thorough preparation from a licensed attorney, let alone from someone representing himself. Arnold nodded respectfully. Thank you, Your Honor. In my experience, whether in bodybuilding, business, or legal matters, preparation is everything. When I discovered Mr. Martinez's deception, I knew I had to do more than just prove my case. I had a responsibility to expose this pattern of fraud to prevent future victims. The courtroom buzzed with whispers as everyone present realized they were witnessing something extraordinary. The man they had dismissed as just another muscle-bound immigrant had transformed into a legal force to be reckoned with, and he wasn't finished yet. As Arnold prepared to reveal his next piece of evidence, the courtroom doors quietly opened. To everyone's surprise, 3 people walked in and took seats in the back row. Arnold had been expecting them, but their presence caused Martinez to visibly pale. Your Honor, Arnold said, I would like to call my next witnesses, Mr. David Thompson, Ms. Sarah Chen, and Mr. Robert Fisher, all former business partners of Mr. Martinez. Cohen leaped to his feet. Objection, Your Honor. We weren't notified about these witnesses. Actually, Arnold replied calmly, pulling out another document. I filed the witness list with the court last week. I have the receipt right here, signed by your office. Judge Henderson examined the paperwork and nodded. Objection overruled. You may proceed, Mr. Schwarzenegger. David Thompson was the first to take the stand. A well-dressed man in his 50s, he had the bearing of a successful businessman. I entered into a partnership with Mr. Martinez in 1976 to purchase and renovate commercial properties, Thompson testified. Within 6 months, I discovered he had been doctoring the accounting books to hide repair expenses. Martinez whispered frantically to his lawyer, but the damage was already done. Sarah Chen's testimony proved even more damaging. I was Mr. Martinez's real estate agent for 2 years. Chen stated firmly. He specifically instructed me to schedule property showings only on sunny days and to avoid potential buyers who might bring their own inspectors. The judge listened intently, occasionally glancing at Martinez, whose confident demeanor had completely crumbled. Robert Fisher's testimony delivered the final blow. As a building contractor, Fisher explained, I worked on several of Mr. Martinez's properties. He always insisted on using substandard materials and covering up problems rather than fixing them properly. When I threatened to report him, he blackmailed me with false accusations of theft. Arnold approached the bench with another document. Your Honor, I have here Mr. Fisher's detailed records of all the substandard repairs Mr. Martinez ordered, complete with dates, locations, and photographs. Judge Henderson studied the records carefully while Cohen desperately tried to find a way to discredit the witnesses. Your Honor, these individuals clearly have personal grievances against my client. Their testimony should be considered biased. If I may, Arnold countered, I have also obtained bank records showing suspicious transfers from Mr. Martinez's accounts to offshore banks, coinciding with each fraudulent property sale. He placed the financial documents on the evidence table. These records suggest a deliberate pattern of fraud, not isolated incidents. The courtroom fell silent as the judge reviewed the new evidence. Martinez, who had been so smug at the beginning of the trial, now sat slumped in his chair, his face ashen. Your Honor, Arnold continued, I would like to draw your attention to this particular transaction. He pointed to a specific entry. This shows Mr. Martinez deposited the insurance payment for repairs to my gym's water damage, but the money was immediately transferred to a Cayman Islands account. Cohen attempted one last desperate objection. Your Honor, these financial records were obtained without my client's consent. On the contrary, Arnold replied, producing yet another document. These are public records obtained through legal channels. I have here the formal requests and authorizations from each relevant financial institution. Judge Henderson nodded approvingly. Mr. Schwarzenegger, your attention to legal procedure is commendable. The spectators in the courtroom, who had originally come expecting to see a muscleman fumble through legal proceedings, were now watching in amazement as Arnold systematically dismantled Martinez's entire fraudulent operation. And finally, Your Honor, Arnold said, reaching for his last piece of evidence, I have here a signed confession from Mr. Martinez's former secretary, detailing how she was instructed to create false maintenance records for all his properties. Martinez suddenly stood up, his face contorted with anger and defeat. This is impossible. How did you get all this? You're just a bodybuilder. Judge Henderson banged his gavel. Mr. Martinez, sit down immediately. He turned to Arnold with newfound respect. Mr. Schwarzenegger, you have presented one of the most thoroughly documented cases I've seen in my courtroom. Please continue. As Arnold prepared to present his final evidence, the transformation was complete. The man who had been mocked for his accent and appearance just hours ago had revealed himself to be a masterful legal strategist, and everyone in the courtroom knew they were witnessing something extraordinary. Judge Henderson leaned forward in his chair, his earlier skepticism completely replaced by genuine interest. Mr. Schwarzenegger, before you present your final evidence, I have some questions for you. Arnold stood respectfully. Of course, Your Honor. In all my years on the bench, the judge began, removing his glasses, I'd never seen a non-lawyer present such a methodically prepared case. How did you manage to gather all this evidence? Arnold's response revealed yet another surprise. Your Honor, I approached this case the same way I approach everything in life, with total dedication. For the past month, I spent every morning at City Hall reviewing property records, every afternoon tracking down witnesses, and every evening studying law books. The judge nodded thoughtfully. And the legal precedents you cited? Those aren't things one simply stumbles upon. No, Your Honor, Arnold replied. I consulted with law librarians who helped me research similar cases. I studied the California Civil Code every night until my eyes couldn't stay open. When I discovered Mr. Martinez's pattern of fraud, I knew I had to be thoroughly prepared. Meanwhile, Martinez sat slumped in his chair, his lawyer Cohen frantically flipping through papers, searching for any possible defense against the mountain of evidence. Your Honor, Arnold continued, I have one final piece of evidence that ties everything together. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a small red notebook. This was provided to me by Mr. Martinez's former bookkeeper, Mrs. Eleanor Hayes. At the mention of this name, Martinez suddenly jerked upright, his face draining of color. This notebook, Arnold explained, contains Mr. Martinez's personal notes detailing his scheme. It includes dates, property addresses, and most importantly, his calculations of profits from each fraudulent sale. Cohen jumped to his feet. Objection, Your Honor. That notebook was stolen property. Actually, Arnold countered smoothly. Mrs. Hayes legally owned this notebook as it was given to her by Mr. Martinez as a gift. I have her sworn affidavit here, along with witnesses who can testify to Mr. Martinez giving her this notebook on her retirement day, telling her to keep it as a souvenir. Judge Henderson accepted the affidavit, studying it carefully before addressing Martinez directly. Mr. Martinez, you deny giving this notebook to Mrs. Hayes. Martinez, trapped by his own past actions, could only shake his head silently. Arnold proceeded to read from the notebook, revealing detailed entries about each fraudulent property sale, including the gym he had purchased. The entries showed precise calculations of how much money Martinez saved by concealing damages instead of repairing them. The courtroom sat in stunned silence as Arnold methodically connected every piece of evidence to entries in the notebook. The dates matched the property sales, the financial transactions aligned with the bank records, and the described cover-ups corresponded perfectly with the witness testimonies. Judge Henderson, now completely engaged, began asking detailed questions about specific transactions and legal statutes. To everyone's amazement, Arnold answered each question with precision, citing relevant laws and precedents. Mr. Schwarzenegger, the judge said, you mentioned earlier that you spent time studying law books. Exactly how much time are we talking about? 437 hours over the past month, Your Honor, Arnold replied without hesitation. I kept a log of my study time, just as I logged my training hours in the gym. I believe that success in any field requires disciplined dedication. The judge shook his head in amazement. That's more preparation than many licensed attorneys put into their cases. He turned to Cohen. Counselor, do you have any response to this evidence? Cohen stood slowly, looking defeated. Your Honor, in light of the overwhelming evidence presented, my client would like to request a brief recess to discuss possible settlement options. But Arnold wasn't finished. Your Honor, before we consider any settlement, there's one more aspect of this case that needs to be addressed. He pulled out one final document. I have here evidence that Mr. Martinez is currently in the process of selling another property under similar fraudulent conditions. I believe the court has a responsibility to prevent any further victims. The judge's expression turned serious as he realized the full implications of the case before him. This wasn't just about one gym anymore. It was about stopping a pattern of fraud that had affected numerous victims. The stage was set for the final dramatic conclusion of this extraordinary legal battle. Judge Henderson sat upright in his chair, his demeanor now completely transformed from his earlier dismissive attitude. Mr. Schwarzenegger, based on the evidence you presented, this court needs to address not just your case, but the broader pattern of fraud perpetrated by Mr. Martinez. Arnold nodded solemnly. Yes, Your Honor. That's why I've also prepared documentation showing the total financial impact on all known victims. He presented one final set of papers. The combined losses amount to over $450,000 across all cases. The judge reviewed the documents carefully before looking directly at Martinez. Mr. Martinez, stand up. His voice carried the weight of authority earned through years on the bench. In all my years as a judge, I have rarely seen such a thoroughly documented case of systematic fraud. Martinez stood shakily, his earlier arrogance completely vanished. His lawyer, Cohen, appeared equally deflated, knowing they had been outmaneuvered by someone they had gravely underestimated. Based on the overwhelming evidence presented, Judge Henderson continued, this court rules in favor of Mr. Schwarzenegger. Mr. Martinez, you are ordered to repay the full purchase price of $85,000, plus all repair costs amounting to $47,500, along with punitive damages of $100,000. The courtroom erupted in murmurs, but the judge wasn't finished. Furthermore, I am ordering an immediate freeze on all your current property transactions, pending a full investigation by the district attorney's office. I am also ordering you to establish a restitution fund for your previous victims. the details of which will be determined in a separate hearing. Arnold stood respectfully as the judge turned to address him directly. "Mr. Schwarzenegger," Judge Henderson said, removing his glasses, "I owe you a public apology. When you walked into my courtroom this morning, I made unfair assumptions based on your appearance and accent. You have demonstrated not only exceptional legal acumen, but also a commitment to justice that many lawyers would do well to emulate." Arnold bowed slightly. "Thank you, Your Honor. In my life, I've learned that people often underestimate those who are different. I've made it my mission to prove them wrong, not just for myself, but for others who might face similar prejudices." The judge nodded thoughtfully. "Have you ever considered pursuing a legal career, Mr. Schwarzenegger?" A small smile crossed Arnold's face. "Thank you, Your Honor, but I have other dreams to pursue. However, this experience has taught me that with proper preparation and dedication, we can succeed in any arena." As the courtroom began to clear, the previous victims who had testified approached Arnold, tears in their eyes, thanking him for bringing their stories to light. Martinez was led away by his lawyer, his real estate empire crumbling around him. Local reporters who had come expecting to write a humorous story about a bodybuilder's failed court case were now scrambling to cover what would become known as one of the most remarkable legal victories by a non-lawyer in Los Angeles history. Outside the courthouse, standing in the bright California sun, Arnold was surrounded by well-wishers and reporters. One journalist asked him what he planned to do next. "This case was never just about my gym," Arnold replied, his accent strong but his words clear and purposeful. "It was about standing up against those who think they can take advantage of others. In America, justice is possible if you're willing to work for it." As he walked down the courthouse steps, Arnold couldn't help but smile, thinking about how the day had begun with a judge mocking his accent and ended with that same judge praising his legal expertise. It was a powerful reminder of one of his favorite sayings: "Never let anyone tell you what you can't do." That evening, as Arnold returned to his gym, now soon to be properly repaired, he placed the court documents in a special folder. Years later, long after he had become a famous actor and then governor of California, he would often point to this case as one of his proudest achievements. Not because of the money he won, but because it proved what he had always believed: with dedication, preparation, and courage, any obstacle could be overcome. The case became legendary in Los Angeles legal circles, and the story of the bodybuilder who outwitted a fraudulent real estate developer would be told and retold for years to come, inspiring others to stand up for justice, regardless of their background or how others might judge them.